So this is part 2, our series of tutorials covering site orthographics. If you remember last time, I took a place where we had kind of a site topo map that we could trace. I've gone ahead and trace it. I'm going to draw within this rectangle here, and once you download your site model, you'll notice that you have these rectangles, and those are going to indicate that's like at the scale that we're working, a 32nd of an inch. That's the size of the window that we're going to draw, basically. So we also have these larger um, circles here that are provided by the studio that indicate recommended placement for your projects. We're not to that point yet, so we're going to keep that line, but separate for right now. So basically, I got a slightly more zoomed in topo map that I could, so it gave me a little bit thinner lines that I could trace a little bit easier than this guy, which is the one we got before. So I just zoomed in a little bit closer, like I said, print that guy and place it right in Rhino. And then I also went ahead and I traced those contour lines just using the polyline tool. And that's the same contour line here. Okay. And so what I want to do next is kind of set myself up with a file that's going to be easy to draw with. So I have the contour lines, and I have a couple of the lines that are important to the context here. What I want to do next is I'm just going to export everything I want to keep from this file. And I'm going to then take that into a new Rhino file, and I'm going to start working on a more detailed orthographic representation at that scale. So, and also going to take with me one of these more zoomed in, not this one, but it's more zoomed in Google Earth image, because that'll just act as a good reference for some of the site features. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select everything. I'm dragging to the left here. That's my dash line, so it's selecting everything that my line is touching. I'll select everything within that rectangle, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in export. Actually, no, I'm sorry, not that. I go to File, and I'm going to go to Export Selected. And I'll choose a location. Save that. Folder yet. Choose a location to save my model. I'm just going to save it as another Rhino 6 file, because I want to preserve this file that has all the additional detail more zoomed out, but I also want to make a file that's a little bit cleaner and easier to work with before I start adding it. So, okay, I'll save that out. Now I have another blank Rhino window. I'm just going to open up that. Okay, and so you can see I have fewer layers and I have less detail than what I need to really show what's going on in my model here. I'm just going to, just better to do this once I've already got it in. And anything obviously outside the boundary, that's not the boundary I'm using. I'm just going to turn off these parcel numbers because location, leave that there. Turn off my image there. And then I can also, this is like Now, I don't need to trim everything, obviously, delete everything for that, but it'll just help me get organized. I'm also going to get rid of this because it's the suggestion of placement for the other site, which is more down there that I just got rid of. Okay, cool. So basically, this is where I'm going to start from in terms of developing my site orthographics. And the reason that I really wanted to include aerial images, a lot of the detail that I'm going to add here now will correspond to some of the information that I'm getting more from kind of like the aerial image, really. There's also some stuff I'm going to clean up. I'm going to clean up some of my contour lines to make them smoother. I'm just going to keep the ones that are relevant. And I'm also going to clean up some of the less up-to-date street information, like this. This isn't a street, it's a bike path, but I'm going to draw this more precisely. I'm going to draw that more precisely. I'm going to outline some of the houses. Okay. So what I want to do first is just go ahead and start setting up my layers, just like I did with our toolbox drawings. I'm going to make a series of layers in all different colors. You know, the other thing I'll do really quick here is like, I'm gonna get rid of that. I can check out. This is kind of showing me these layers that are from mapped image city. But what I really want to focus on with this drawing is kind of like the qualities of the site. Things like surface material, ground texture, kind of some of the more detailed physical features, as well as the kind of natural features, topography, vegetation. So I'm just going to kind of go. Let me. Okay, once you have it kind of cleaned up the way you like it, another quick tool that you'll use a lot. I use the command purge. And purge will do things like it'll delete, rendered materials that you're not using, layers that you're not. So I'm going to turn the layers option on. See, that cleaned up quite a few layers in my layers panel. So again, oops, right? I didn't want to do that because I just made a bunch of new layers. Yeah, so I should have done that before I made new layers. But go ahead and do it again. Obviously, that's only one step. Back up. Okay, great. So purge will get rid of layers you don't want. You should do it before you make it layers because them too, unless you're already using them. Okay, great. So now I'm ready to kind of start to edit my line. So I'm going to start by just adding. This is the boundary of my site. Go ahead and lock some of these other layers. Site boundaries. That'll lock that. Lock my aerial image. Okay. I'm going to start by just kind of trying to make sure these lines are more accurate here. There. So I'm just going to kind of trace as best I can. And actually, we can use a couple different tools here. I'm going to use the Interp Curve. And so like with Polyline, I can draw a line with a series of points. I'm just going to make a curved line. And so there's this button here is just called curve. I don't want to use that. Curve is going to draw a line in a way where I'm not actually hitting those points that I just drew. I do want to use this command called interp curve or interpolate curve. Right, and trace, I'm also holding Alt on my keyboard. To not snap to, like, so I'm close to that other line, but I don't actually want to snap to it. Holding Alt to kind of temporarily disable snaps. Here, like I said, some of these lines aren't totally and stuff. So, what you'll find with most things like this, like pathways and streets, is it's best to basically trace out one edge best you can. So right here, I have a kind of a sharper kink in that line. I'm going to go ahead and end it there when I'm done. Make it start drawing another line here, another line again. So anytime I have a sharp, go ahead and start a new line. Not to be perfect, but basically, so we're going to trace out one edge and see here I'm past the boundary of where my sight drawing will be. So I'll go there. I'll select these three lines and I'll join them, type in the join. Now they're one set of polylines, polycurves, I should say. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the command offset. Again, I'm going to measure a distance. That's going to be my dash. I can go ahead and call. A little bit there. Okay. Delete this guy real quick. And these guys in. Now I'll offset that one. Also, of course, I can just edit to. Okay. So that line should pretty well match where we want our dash line to go, except for where we get these weird conditions. And also we can delete on us. A little bit worse sometimes. Okay. There's our dash line. I'm gonna go ahead and add that on a different layer, and I'm actually gonna. Looks like that's kind of the only dash line that I really have in here. So I'm gonna actually, instead of using the layer dash line, which is something I'm gonna use as kind of like a graphic layer, what I want to do is just apply a line type to this guy that's gonna pretty closely match. Perfect, obviously, the kind of spacing and length of the dashes that I see in that pathway. So I'm gonna call this my bike. Throw that onto a separate layer. Object. Actually, now might be a good time I could set this to. So right there, you see, for example, way too many. What I could do is actually, I'm going to split this line. I'm just going to type in the command split without selecting anything. Rather than use some other curves or draw some other curves to split it, I'm going to use the option point. I'll just click like up there. I like that. So that's separated this segment. Now I can take this segment and I can basically reduce the number of points that it has. And I'll do that by typing in rebuild. So the rebuild command allows me to change how many points, how many control points an object has, curves and other types of objects too. So we can see here if I click preview, I'm going from, so this is what my curve has presently, 77 points. I'm going 77 to 10. That's actually pretty accurate to what the line is. So you'll have to choose the number of points you want depending on you need it to go, where you need that line to go, but obviously that one matches pretty well. Great. So what I'm going to do now, well, I'll deal with composition later, but I'm just going to keep that dash line on a separate layer, and I'll show you how to make a custom dash for it, get to line weights and graphic lines. While I'm on the topic of kind of rebuilding lines, what I also want to do is kind of smooth out my topo lines. A lot of these topo lines are giving me some information about what's going on in the site that I can't tell. Obviously, we know there's an edge here. That's where the kind of fall off happens towards the river. The property kind of starts to step down towards the river. So we have another kind of access way here or drainage way. But what I am going to do is I'm going to just the lines that I traced. What I actually want to do is just delete, not using here. Then the ones that I am going to keep, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to rebuild them. And so I'm going to actually try to do that. I'm on the right layer there. Go rebuild. So what you'll notice is that it's going to, when I rebuild a polyline, it automatically wants to turn it into a curve. Now I can turn up the number of control points and click preview. You can see that matches a lot more closely. Now I am going to keep it as a curve. That's what I want. I want it to be a little more smooth, a little more gradual. But the other thing I wanted to point out here, though, is if I didn't want to turn it into a curve, there's this thing called curvature degree. A curvature degree of 1 basically means there is no curvature. See what I'm doing when I rebuild a curve, the degree of 1 to a degree of 1. I'm just rebuilding a polyline by moving the points, rebuilding it with a number of points. The other thing rebuild does is it tends to kind of evenly distribute them. Like you can see there, if I rebuild it with a degree of 1, it kind of spaces out those points pretty evenly, and it keeps it as a polyline. I don't want to do that. I want to make it a curve, but just so you're aware, that's what degree means. That looks good. I'm going to go kind of one by one here because it is important. With each one to kind of use the number of control points that's appropriate based on its length. Because, if you rebuild a really, really long line like this guy, for example, with not enough points, you can see it's totally messing up what the shape should be. Play around with that number and click preview till it's fairly accurate. You can see that. That's pretty. And of course, we can always hit Control Z and do it if it really good. All right, so we're just kind of smoothing out these lines a little bit more organically. Actually, if you kind of hover around the same number of points the curve has presently, that'll kind of help gauge whether you're going to get a decent smooth curve or not. That's myself. Okay. Anyways, you can go through all that on your own, but yeah. And I'll go ahead and pause it and just. Okay. So once I'm pretty happy with where my contour lines look, next thing I want to illustrate here is how to kind of get this to look more accurate. This traffic circle, that's an important element of the site here. But once again, I'm just going to use the command Interp Curve. I'll kind of start from the outside. And I should point out, you can hit Control Z while you're drawing these. Make one that's kind of weird and you draw the whole thing. Of course, you can also just. But once again, I'm just going to offset. Let's close. As I can. Also, what I might actually do here is I'll just draw a straight line. See, and this is especially true sometimes with streets and stuff like that. The rest of that curve there. Right? I'll join those straight lines, and then I'm going to use the command fillet. I'll see what that looks. Fillet radius of 10. Okay. What I would also do here, I think, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll set up our page right now, just so we can kind of get a sense of what we need to be drawing. And what I mean by that is, like, we're working at a certain scale, right? So if I wanted to get really crazy, I could go in here and start drawing, that's some kind of sewage drain thing. I may actually want to draw that, but what I mean is, like, maybe I don't necessarily need to draw that curve, right, that I'm seeing around this traffic circle as a double line, right? Because at the scale that this drawing is going to end up, wouldn't really see. So, oops. Okay, anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my page at the right scale and just kind of give myself a better sense of how much detail I really should be drawing. So just like before, I'll make a layout. I know PDF. I'm going to go custom because we're doing 22 by 22. And I'll click OK. Yeah, so a couple things going on here. One is the text gigantic. I'll show you how to fix that just because it's a good thing to know. So when you select text, it has a certain size. If I go to properties and I see a little text button, obviously the height of my text is gigantic. I don't want it that big. So to adjust everything at once, I'll just go SEL text. And I'll make it a size. And so the height that I want to enter in here is actually really the height that I want it to look on my page. I'm going to go to like an eighth of an inch, 0.12. Maybe I'll try it. Okay. You see that looks actually pretty good. Or is it no? Need to be. The other thing that I can adjust, so now if I go back to my model space, see where those text objects are because they're so small, right? I still want them to look big in my model space. So what I can do is I can change this other option, which is my model space scale, fit to 30. And I can see that a little bit better. There we go. The model space scale is going to reflect, obviously the number of times bigger text is going to appear in model space based on the size that it is for print given for. So anyway, so once I get that all set up, I'm going to select my detail window here and set a scale for myself. 1 inch equals 32. Now, you may be wondering, how do I actually line this up? Like I said, you've been provided these boundaries. The red line is actually 24 by 24, so that crosshair that you see in each of the corners inset a little bit. It's the 22 by 20. That what I'm going to do is try and line that up. Oh, shouldn't have. Center it on the page. Okay, one of the ways you can actually deal with this is you see how when I move a detail window, okay, so the best way is just going to be to try and line it up as we can. All right, so the next thing that I would try and start adding, so while we're at it, see the point of this was the right scale. If I go to zoom, in the command zoom, I'm going to hit 1 to 1. That's going to give me a pretty good sense on my screen, like if I were to print this out, how big it would be. And so you can see that the lines that kind of define some of these edges really not that big, right? So we're actually not gonna see that. Let's use a thicker line to represent that curve rather than try and draw it as a double line. Here, thicker scale. Anyway, so that zoom to 1 to 1 thing will help a lot, right? Back to model space here. The other thing I might want to do is I would maybe start to draw some of these houses. And I don't need a ton of detail. Show enough detail. See what's going on. So I might draw like the pitch of the roof, right? That way somebody just knows, to the roof of a house. A lot of these houses are the same. You'll get the idea. That's on one. Not even in my frame. And mindful of what's on my page. All right, good. And oh, and so we'd also probably want to indicate backyard. That like deep. We'd have to finish editing that stuff over. Better because it's off the page. All right. I guess the other big thing that I want to talk about here is going to be how do I add some indication of vegetation. So in order to do that, I'm going to use something called a CAD block. I'm going to go to my internet browser. I'm going to type in, I don't know, CAD blocks 3, blocks.net. And we can see in here, if I type in 3, get all kinds of different results. And these are just files I can download. You can see these ones are plan, show trees in plan, a whole bunch of different ones. Many there, that's going to be like 3. Same. Anyway, so find one you like. Same one. So what I do kind of want to steer away from, to be honest, is some of these tree blocks that have hatch, colored hatch, like some of them have a lot of detail indicated in the leaves and stuff like that. That's fine, but I don't want to like have a ton of detail in my CAD blocks, because that's actually super. All right, let's just download this one. Deal with it. Of course, we can. And of course, I'm also looking for trees that kind of present a little bit closer to what we're looking for, with the type of an area. So if I open up this file, you can see I'm going to drag that guy right into Rhino, or perhaps because archive, right click and go to extract all. Okay, I'll drag that, and I'll just click import, make sure the file, leave it on feet and inches, hopefully out right. Okay. Now I'm just going to go select all, Oh, all zoom selected trees. So what I might even do here, find a couple that I want to keep. I'm kind of looking for ones that are a little more ruffled of an edge. You know, we have a lot of mesquites on our site. I'm gonna save a few different blocks because I want to also use this to illustrate a variety of types of vegetation. That's a nice. Again, I'm steering away from these ones that have a ton of lines, so they're going to be slow, and they're also going to be graphically really dominant. You do one or two that are bush-like. I don't know. Okay. Okay. Then I'm going to type invert. Now remember, so obviously invert selects everything that wasn't selected before, but remember that also includes the stuff in our way out over there. You can see that little yellow speck. So I'm just going to deselect that. Type zoom selected again and delete. Get rid of everything that I didn't select. Keep. And these are going to be our little library of trees and bushes. Now, I don't know if we talked about this previously or not. There's my little guy. Oh, I don't want to be moving everything. Why I'm not closer. Okay. Select all, zoom, selected. Select that. Selected, there we go. You can see everything's a lot bigger. That's part of my hard time here. But okay, cool. So now we have our CAD blocks. Now, like I mentioned perhaps in a previous tutorial, a block in Rhino is an object that has kind of repeatable properties. In other words, when I have two blocks, say I were to copy this block, anytime I edit one of the blocks, every other instance of that block is going to change with the same properties. So for example, if I double click on this, or if I use the command block edit, and I select all those lines, you can see they're on a layer called 0. I'm going to move them to a layer called light. Click OK. And oops. So you can see now it's changed what layer it's on. I also want to change what display color layer, so we'll have to go through each property and go to by layer. Color print with all. It prints properly. Now I'll click OK, and you can see that even though I only added one of them, did the same to every other block, every other instance of that block. So when the other thing is it'll save on like file storage. It'll run faster and stuff like that. So what I want to do is use a couple of these CAD blocks And I'm going to edit each one so that they have properties I want, layer I want, there. Okay, see that it's changed. So if I were to use these blocks to start to kind of, obviously we have a couple big trees over here. That might be something that's really cool to show. We have perhaps a different kind of tree right there. Let's say I wanted to use this block, or even some of these larger, kind of wilder trees over to the side. Let's say I wanted to use this block to show a variety of these other kinds of trees. The best way to do that is going to be to use my orient. I'm going to type in the word orient, not orient 3-point, just orient, press enter. And so what orient will allow me to do is like reposition an object, change its orientation. It'll also allow me to copy, this option copy, and it'll also allow me to scale. That option scale, I'll hit 3D. So basically I'm gonna click on the center, somewhere around the center of where that block is, and somewhere around the edge. Those are my reference points. Now, every time I want to show that there's a tree on my site, I'm going to click in the middle of it, click edge of it. And you'll also notice that each time I do that, I'm kind of moving what direction I'm clicking. Why do I want to do that? Because that's going to allow me to make it look like it's not all the same block, right? So if they're all in different orientations, it'll make it look a little more kind of natural and mild and stuff like that. So show with this block. Anyway, so what I would go through is I would go through and I would kind of show all these kind of smaller plants, block perhaps. Then I might choose a different block to show some of these bigger plants. And I can make them overlap. I can cluster, that kind of. Anyway, so I would go through and I would kind of try to trace out as many of these that I think I see. And you can see with orient, I can very quickly copy the size of each thing that I'm tracing, and I can change that orientation. And also, by the way, I'm holding Alt on the keyboard. Faster. Okay. So I think I'm going to end the video there. And so on the next tutorial, I'm going to talk about more how to kind of graphically illustrate material I'm seeing in this site plan. All right, stop it there.